This is so moving for me. This really is very, very moving for me. Welcome and hi to everyone who's here for what is the first TBD Mama event. I'm so grateful to each of you for coming out today to join us, and I'm particularly grateful to Dr.Alexandra Sacks, who is our inaugural speaker today. But before I properly introduce Dr. Sacks, I wanted to take a few minutes just to tell you all a little bit about me and how TBD Mama was born. So firstly, my name is Carrie Roston, for those of you who don't know me. I am an author, I am a reader, I am an avid Googler. I am a perfectly imperfect mama to my beautiful 3-year-old son, Karuna. And I am the publisher and the founder of TBD Mama. TBD because so much is to be determined before, during, and after, if there is an after, for this transformative part of our lives. TBD Mama is a newsletter and a website filled with what I like to call mom-adjacent content, currently curated and written by me, but that should soon change. When I tried to get pregnant for the first time in 2015, I was 38. I was told my eggs were dying every day. They weren't. And every time I went online to answer a question, I dead-ended and didn't find any meaningful content that spoke to me more than as a consumer of product, but also as an integrated, complex, neurotic, complicated woman who was becoming a mom. Too often I found the focus online was on my developing child's experience and needs, not at all on my own. This frustration while Googling, it continued well into the early stages of my own matrescence journey. Mom content didn't answer any of the questions that I had, and I had a lot. Have you ever Googled hormonal crashes after breastfeeding? Even, what about just stopping breastfeeding, period? It's dead ends. What to do after an emergency C? Nothing. There was nothing. On the Atlantic, in The Nation, New York, New Yorker, it was like, okay, I come from editorial, so I know most of the people at the highest perches are men, so they've never been pregnant, but it was mystifying, and it really made me angry. It made me very angry. Most of the mom sites would dead end to photos of really fabulous homes and fabulous perfect moms with perfect mother style, and those made me feel really bad. And don't get me wrong, I love fabulous homes. I love fabulous clothes. Okay, I used to be a stylist decades ago. That was my profession. But I wanted content that had style and substance. I wanted articles that took into account the whole mother experience, warts and all. I also desperately wanted to connect and meet with other imperfect mamas who sometimes didn't like their babies, who sometimes resented being attached if they breastfed, to a permanent vending machine, and who wanted to be honest and open about not loving every single aspect of being a mom. So last summer, I became pregnant for what was the third time, and at 9.5 weeks, I miscarried and was equal parts devastated and determined to somehow make sense of that loss. and to somehow move forward. I started TBD Mama at first as a therapeutic journaling exercise to write for myself, so I didn't feel so crazy in my own head. It was because of this space, Habitas, which we're all in today, quite honestly, that I was able to connect back to my authentic voice and start writing. Then I started writing for women I knew who had gone through similar experiences and were like me. And soon I encountered and discovered people subscribing whom I didn't know, even some men who also wanted to know about and talk about and explore these topics that just are not explored enough. My greater goal here with TBD Mama is to help cultivate what I like to call an empowerment community. I know that word is thrown around a lot, but I really, really mean it. From my deepest soul heart space, I want to generate a online and in real life community of women and men, aspiring mothers, women who are expecting, women who are hoping to be expecting, the men and women who love the mothers, to be a part of a larger conversation about what it means to be a mama right now. So in that spirit of exploring new narratives and conversation, I came upon TED.com, as I do, searching for the right podcast for, I think, what was edition 4. And the universe, or a really good algorithm, showed me this video that had been viewed indeed over 1 million times. And it was a transformative moment for me that motivated and moved me so much, it inspired me to cold email the speaker who sits before us and invite her to speak with us about that talk and about her work. That talk is called A New Way to Think About the Transition to Motherhood. And here's a blurb from TED.com describing its gist. When a baby is born, so is a mother. But the natural and sometimes unsteady process of transition to motherhood is often silenced by shame or misdiagnosed as postpartum depression. I like that, misdiagnosed, pathologized, right? In this quick, informative talk, reproductive psychiatrist Alexandra Sacks breaks down the emotional tug-of-war of becoming a new mother and shares a term that could help describe it, matrescence. A little more about Dr. Sacks. Alexandra Sacks, MD, is a reproductive psychiatrist. Why did I not even know that was a thing? Where were you? Sorry, Maggie, that's my longtime therapist. Affiliated with the women's program at the Columbia University Medical Center and a candidate at the Columbia University Psychoanalytic Center for Training and Research. A leading expert in matrescence, she is known for popularizing the concept in her TED Talk with over 1 million views worldwide, and in her New York Times article, The Birth of a Mother, the #1 most read piece of 2017 for the Well Family section, where she's a regular contributor. Dr. Sacks was a scholar at the DeWitt Wallace Institute for the History of Psychiatry and serves on the American Psychoanalytic Association Advisory Board for Media Education. Her work on matrescence and quote-unquote mommy brain has been featured in Time, NPR, The Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. Dr. Sacks is developing a motherhood podcast with Gimlet Media. Her first co-authored book, which you can pre-order now on Amazon, What No One Tells You, A Guide to Your Emotions from Pregnancy to Motherhood, will be published in April 2019 by Simon & Schuster. Again, Dr. Sacks, thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome.
I am hopefully going to be a good enough speaker. Good enough mother is a thing we're going to talk a lot about today, but forgive me because I have a little bit of a cold. But it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for being so brave to talk a little bit about your experience. I know a lot of women here can relate. You know, these questions about why the content isn't Googleable and why people don't know what reproductive psychiatry is and why we're just starting to generate the language around this stuff. There are many different reasons. I mean, I think some of them relate to stigma and shame, that it has been culturally taboo to talk about the less than happy or more complex than happy emotions of motherhood. But that has really been fascinating to me, because I'm an adult psychiatrist, I'm a therapist, and we understand that life is complex and that relationships are complex, that figuring out what you want to do professionally and beginning a new job is going to have ups and downs and stress around a transition, that marriage can be a blissful institution and require a lot of work. So we're very familiar with the human elements of things feeling real, and in that reality they're nuanced, that they can feel good and bad at the same time. But it's been really scary, I think, to include motherhood in that human dialogue. And so I think I'm in a privileged position because I'm a medical expert, where I can say things that might be scary for other people to say. Doesn't mean I necessarily know them to be right or myself to have all the answers, but I think it's time to start talking about women and families today, what it means to grow a family, what's hard and fun about it. And there's so much to discuss. There's so much to discuss. I mean, and there's so much that is still scary for people to discuss. You know, you're so brave for talking about a 9-week miscarriage. Many of my patients tell me that they're the only one of their friends who've had a miscarriage. And statistically, that's just not true. Miscarriage is extremely common. Why do people not talk to each other about it? Many women don't breastfeed. They can't. They choose not to. Why do people not talk about that? You know, so I'm here to really encourage people to talk, to ask me questions, to ask each other questions. And postpartum depression is a real condition. It's a real illness. Some people in this room may have it. I treat many people who have it. We need to talk about it more. We need to expand research around treating it. But not everyone who is feeling ups and downs in the human relationship of motherhood is depressed. Just like not everyone who has a fight with their partner is in a declining marriage. Life is complicated. So the word matrescence, which was first coined in 1973 by a medical anthropologist, a woman named Dana Raphael, who actually was the first person, from my understanding, who started using the word doula. She's a very innovative thinker, and as an anthropologist studying motherhood all around the world, she was interested in the transition, the human transition, the psychological transition into the motherhood experience. And for some reason, we lost that term. And so we started talking about things like postpartum depression, which are important to talk about. But I think that became the one word, the one term that people had to talk about the challenges of motherhood, when depression is a medical condition, requires treatment, it's highly treatable, nothing to be ashamed of. But challenges of motherhood is not necessarily always overlapping with depression. And that's what matrescence is. Matrescence, I think, is such a helpful word because it's modeled after adolescence, which is a very familiar concept. We don't need a TED Talk about what adolescence is. We know that it's the transition from childhood to adulthood in the human body. We think of it as being a challenging time for humans. We know that it's a physical growing phase. We know that it's a hormonal growing phase. We also know that it's an identity shift, that there are changes in a person's social environment, how they feel and how they relate to the world when they're transitioning from childhood to adulthood. That's adolescence. The same is true for motherhood. Everyone in this room, whether you're a mother or not, that's obvious, that's intuitive. Your body changes, your hormones change, your life changes. You feel up and down. It's not rocket science, but
Why is it so significant to name it?
yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is, for the reasons I mentioned before and for reasons we could all discuss, a topic that's hard for people to talk about. So if the onus is on you to be anxious about sharing your experience, not sure if what you're going to say is going to make someone judge you, or if you're going to feel embarrassed about it, if the onus is on you to also come up with the words to describe how you're feeling, that's scary. And I think that makes it harder to talk. So it's important, I think, to have easy to catch words, right? But also, we know, I mean, this is the whole essence of talk therapy, is that it's healing to share a story. It connects you to other humans. I mean, that's sort of, there's nothing more essentially human than storytelling. And that's been something that our communities have organized ourselves around since the beginning of time, around a fire pit. You know, we have all of these places where we share stories today. Social media is one of the most powerful. But, you know, how do we tell each other our stories in a way that's healing? And we need the language to do it, we need permission to do it, and we need to speak. And I think in this, you know, feminism is so interesting to me because different generations of feminism have looked so different. You know, the generations before us, people really struggled to be taken seriously in the workplace, getting opportunities for jobs. We've just gone through another interesting moment in our culture where we're articulating that it's not okay to sexually objectify women in the workplace. We've had to do that many times. But how do we talk today about the multiple layers of identity on women, that you want to have children, that you want to be a mother, that you want to be home with your children, that you also want to have an intellectual life, that you also want to make money, that you also want to be treated equally to a male in the workplace? Wow, that's a lot to want. And I think that you want to have a positive body image, but you also want to feel beautiful in clothing, that you want to, like, it's a lot.
The also.
So these things are hard to talk about because I think we're culturally trying to understand this in real time. And I think it's not so simple as like everybody needs to just be honest about motherhood, because I think there's a lot that we currently as a culture don't understand about motherhood, that we don't have answers for. I think a lot of the women I talk to want two things at the same time. They want to be with their child all day and they want to go to work. Same time. Same time. Who doesn't? They want to, you know, get sleep, but also, you know, yeah. We could spend all day. But I call that the push-pull. And I think it's really profound. And I think that is at the center of the tension of matrescence, and that is the tension that is not postpartum depression, that's different from the anxiety of mental illness. But that is a part of the inherent central tension of motherhood today inside the matrescence experience. And that's part of why I think it's helpful for me to come to these conversations with my understanding about human conflict and human emotional tough spots, you know, and how we can all, we don't necessarily, I think, have the answers, which is part of why it's hard to talk about this stuff and part of why we need language to grab onto.
Right, and that was what, when I first heard the word, there's such a power in naming the something. It validates it, right? It almost makes it real. But I would ask, why would it take, I mean, you're this groundbreaking trooper standing there alone, educating all of us about matrescence. Why don't doctors, most doctors, talk to us about anything when we're expecting, let alone get into matrescence?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there are many different answers. Number one, Western medicine and Western medical education is organized around disease. It's not organized around wellness and prevention. So it's not a coincidence that we had a term for what happens when women are mentally ill and sick after having a baby, postpartum depression, but we did not have a term for what happens in the normal adjustment. We don't talk a lot about natural health and how to prevent illness and wellness in medicine. We don't talk a lot about food. We don't talk a lot about sleep. We don't talk a lot about exercise. We don't talk a lot about community. We talk about heart disease. We talk about arthritis. So these are all diseases. So that's a major flaw in the orientation of Western medicine. And as many of you probably know, it's also really expensive because it's part of why our healthcare system is so broken. You know, we have some of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world for developed countries' health systems, and highest for women of color. That's why it was so important that Serena Williams really opened up that conversation last year. So our healthcare system is very backwards. We have names for diseases, we have treatments for diseases, we have expensive medicines for diseases, but doctors don't spend a lot of time learning about and talking to their patients about preventing diseases. Okay, so that's one of the things. Your doctor probably doesn't spend that much time with you talking about your wellness and how to feel well. And so they're not going to talk to you about your natural, healthy matrescence transition. They just want to know if you are experiencing symptoms of depression and if you might need to go talk to a psychiatrist. But that's a disease model. There's also just so much stigma around mental health in general. A lot of medically oriented doctors, obstetricians, aren't trained and aren't comfortable asking emotional questions. It's very scary for people to talk about feelings, and a lot of doctors are afraid to do it. So it's easy for them. They know how to ask you if you've had a bowel movement, if how it's going with your sleep at night, but how you're feeling with your partner, how you're feeling with your bonding with your baby. A lot of medical professionals are, I think, themselves overwhelmed by how to ask, what questions to ask, what to do with the answers. You know, it's a lot to hold someone else's emotions, right? So someone tells you, gosh, this has been really hard. Sometimes I wake up and ask myself, was this a mistake to have a child? Whoa. What do you say to that? Well, I'll tell you what a lot of doctors say to that. They say, oh, you're going to feel better. It's going to be fine. But that's called minimizing. Or they might say, oh, it sounds like you've postpartum depression. You should maybe try this medication. That's called pathologizing. What happens when you hold someone else's story? What is the therapeutic encounter in listening? It takes time that a lot of doctors don't have. A lot of that has to do, again, with health insurance companies and how they don't reimburse doctors for sitting with people and listening and talking. So there's a long answer to that question, but I think, you know, there's a lot to be done in terms of fixing that is on a level of infrastructure in terms of reducing stigma around talking about emotions and mental health, which is also mental wellness, and helping us think about our healthcare system as having a more prevention model that gives medical professionals more time to sit with patients and listen.
Right. And also in terms of just thinking about the whole journey from pregnancy to motherhood differently, this idea of being a good enough mother, I want to get to, because I love this pull quote from one of your articles where you write, for some of us, good enough sounds like settling. And for New Yorkers, type A'ers, we're like, good enough? No, give me perfection or bust, right? Recovering perfectionist. So you're working hard at being a good mother and making a daily choice to give your baby the best. So why lower the bar? You've likely made financial, personal, even professional sacrifices after all. So shouldn't the results be better than just good enough? You simply need to be a good enough mother who takes care of your baby's basic physical and emotional needs. If your baby feels overall safe and loved, she will be able to tolerate and forgive your imperfections. I love this, and I just would love you to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about that all day. I mean, I'm sorry. No, none of us in this room are perfect. I'm sorry. I'm certainly not. It's just not possible. That's not what living in real time in a real body, interacting with real other creatures who have real feelings and real needs. It's not a sterile environment. It's not a square peg or a round hole. It's life. So we can just do our best. And we know that in our other relationships. No one here has a perfect relationship with their mother. No one here has a perfect relationship with their partner. No one here has a perfect relationship with their best friend. No one here has a perfect relationship with their own body. No one here has a perfect relationship with their own career, right? And none of you are going to have a perfect mastery of motherhood. But it's also like, what does that even look like? Because I think that it's very scary that there are no right answers to parenting. There really aren't. There really aren't. Every baby is different, and as your baby is developing and changing in her needs, how to discipline, how to approach sleep, how to approach feeding, these things change as babies grow. These things change as you adapt to motherhood. These things change when you're maybe home on maternity leave and going back at work. So there is no one plan. The plan has to change every day because you're taking care of a human creature who's changing every day, right? So I think it's very scary for people to think about reassessing every day what you need, what your baby needs, and how it's going. People really want to have a rubric for parenting. And, it's complicated because I'm about to put out a book, but be very wary of parenting books. My book isn't a parenting book. My book is a book for moms.
But in terms of roadmaps and roadmaps to some of the process, is there a general roadmap to matrescence, and does it end? When does it end?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to sketch that out for people, and I think that that is what myself and my co-author, Catherine Berndorf, and I are trying to do in our book, is to sort of talk about the emotions, what to expect when you're expecting emotionally through all the trimesters of pregnancy and the first year of parenting. But so we're offering a roadmap. My hope is that women continue to fill it in with their own stories. Matrescence is not a clear-cut thing that begins at a certain time and ends at a certain time. This is the same as adolescence. We talk about prolonged adolescence. That's been something we've been talking about in sociology recently because young adults are living at home longer. They're getting married later. They're having children later. They're becoming financially independent later. It's very complex in this economy. So we talk about adolescence now extending well into people's 20s, late 20s, whereas in other times we've talked about adolescence ending with high school. So how do we sort of name matrescence? I mean, I don't know. I think that matrescence is an experience of transition. So there are all sorts of different motherhood transitions. I think there's a transition when your children go to school full time. I think there's a transition when your children move out of the house. I think there's a transition if you have additional children or if you find out that you can't. I think there's all sorts of life transitions, and I'm really interested in learning from people about their matrescence and for us to all figure it out. I don't think we benefit necessarily by narrowing the definition. I think we benefit by expanding the definition because really matrescence is just a platform for us talking more about this in terms of body, mind, hormone, and identity. So different people are going to find different ways. I think matrescence starts for people when they think about if they want to be a mom or not. I think matrescence is a part of an egg freezing conversation. It's a part of a biologic conversation that I think it's important to start having more with young women. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of matrescence, and I'm very excited to hear what we all have to say about it.
Yeah. Well, my last question for you here would be, I have two more, okay? what can expecting mothers, especially anyone here who's considering or might currently be expecting or who is hoping to be expecting, what can they do to educate and empower themselves? Well, that's too broad of a question. What could they ask a healthcare provider, perhaps, or what could they do prior to their child's birth?
I don't
those
know.
I wish you would. I wish someone had told me.
What to ask your healthcare provider? I mean, I think start by asking the women in your life. I don't, again, your doctors will have clear answers for you about illness and about what we know that is dangerous and what to watch out for and how to treat it. But I'm not sure your doctors are going to be your wellness experts in terms of how to prepare yourself for motherhood. So talk to your friends, talk to other moms, talk to women who you think will be honest with you. Talk to women of different generations. I think some things you could ask your doctors about, I would say ask about the things that are really, that what do we know for sure in terms of right and wrong about parenting? Because you'll hear that we don't know for sure that it's wrong to not breastfeed, that we don't know for sure that it's wrong to medically manage your pain during childbirth, that we don't know for sure the right ages to space out your 2 children so that they'll feel psychologically well. We don't know for sure the best way to sleep train kids to minimize their anxiety. We don't know anything for sure. There are some things that are known that there's evidence-based literature on, but even those things are generally, this whole question that I deal with a lot in my office in terms of treating people who do have a history of medical depression. There is no clear-cut answer as to if antidepressants are safe or dangerous to take during pregnancy and breastfeeding. There is no one answer to that question. It's a case-by-case question. So I would say the things that you have clear in your mind is the rules for pregnancy and parenthood. Those are the things to ask your doctor about, because generally speaking, you're going to be told, it's a case-by-case decision. I have some patients who do it this way. I have some patients who do it this way. They both do fine. What do you feel is right for you? And I think that's liberating to sort of feel less oppressed by these rules. And are you going to fail them? Are you going to be a perfect mom? What does that even mean? What's the map you're laying out for yourself? It may be scary to find out that there are fewer rules than you think, but it may also be liberating because you can take it one day at a time and use your judgment. No one has better judgment for you about your own body or your own baby or your own family than you. No doctor. So learning about what we do know medically, what are the important things, and then trusting yourself on the rest is really important. And so talk to your peers, but I don't know, I think for some moms, and I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say about this, it's some people find that it's better to not talk to their peers because that makes it harder to listen within. So think about how you are with other decisions. Do you want to ask everyone else how they manage some transition in their life, or do you want to tune those people out and take more time to meditate and take more time to go on walks and take more time to rest so that you can listen to your instincts rather than listen to how other people are making their choices?
Well, with that, I do want to hear from some mamas here who may have a question for you, a question for the group. So who wants to go first? Otherwise, I can keep asking questions.
Hello, my name is Sherry Knight.
Hi. Thanks for asking the first question. Very brave.
The first question, though, you talk about postpartum depression. Everybody hears that. It's not working. Hello? It is? Okay. So you talk about postpartum depression. Everybody hears that word, but what are the top 5 questions that every person should ask themselves?
Yeah.
What is that?
Great.
That's
Great question.
Not clarified anywhere.
Thank you.
You just hear it, you see it in the, everybody knows what to expect when you're expecting, but they don't say what are those symptoms that you should know about.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I
Sure.
think that's extremely helpful. And I'll just talk about what postpartum depression isn't. Why don't I be really clear about what postpartum depression is? So, postpartum depression is depression, like major depressive disorder. It's an episode of depression that occurs around the context of having a baby, and symptoms need to last every day for 2 weeks or longer. So the baby blues is a 14-day window after delivering a baby. That happens in 80 to 90% of women. They have emotional sensitivity, feel tearful, feel not like themselves in the first 14 days after delivering a baby. For most women do have the baby blues, and for most women, their mood normalizes after 14 days. So it's really beyond those 2 weeks postpartum. You're looking at continuing for 2 weeks or more, most days, feeling sad, feeling blue, feeling hopeless, changes and trouble in your sleep. Now, this stuff is complicated because all that stuff is absolutely affected by having a newborn, which is why we often give people the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale, which tries to clarify what are the physical symptoms of pregnancy and postpartum versus symptoms of depression, right? Because sleep disruption, wanting to stay in bed all day or not being able to sleep, is totally common when you have a newborn. But it's the type of sleep disruption where when you lie down and you're exhausted and you want to fall asleep, you can't because you're being kept up by worries. Or after you've gotten enough sleep, you can't get out of bed because you just feel like you have no interest and ability in getting out of bed. So trouble sleeping, trouble eating, trouble experiencing any pleasure from things that you used to like. So if you normally relax by watching a TV show and you turn on a TV show and it does nothing for you, that's a symptom of depression. Socially isolating, not wanting to see people, crying most days, feeling hopeless, having thoughts of not wanting to be alive. Those are some of the symptoms of depression. And again, those are the same symptoms of depression at any other time in life, not just for postpartum depression. So postpartum depression is really a depressive episode that occurs after having a baby. And for many people, postpartum depression symptoms start during pregnancy. We're actually in the medical community changing the term postpartum depression to perinatal PMAD, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, because many of these depressions start during pregnancy, postpartum depressions. Many people who have depression in the postpartum have had depression at other times in their life, and they're just having a flare of that same depression. Many people who have depression in the postpartum have gone off their antidepressants for pregnancy, and their depression is just coming back because they've been off their medicine. Now, there are some people who have a depression after having a baby that's beyond the baby blues, and they've never had depression before, and that's a really interesting category, which leads us to research, and we don't have the answer for this yet. Is there an aspect to postpartum depression that is hormonal, that is unlike depression at other times in life? We know that some women who have postpartum depression also have mood sensitivity around their period. That's a condition called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. We know that some women who have depression around having a baby experience more mood symptoms around menopause. So this question of, is there a condition that's separate from general depression that occurs around a woman's reproductive cycle? And are there people who don't have depression in their life but have mood changes around their menstrual cycle and around their ups and downs of their estrogen and their progesterone? The answer is probably yes. Some of you may relate, but I think many people who have postpartum depression also have general depression, and they're experiencing an episode after having a baby. So to answer your question most simply, postpartum depression is for 2 weeks or longer, beyond those first 14 days after having a baby. You're feeling not well in most days, having difficulty functioning, and really not having access to pleasure. Having lots of worries. Worry is a hallmark of postpartum depression. But again, in shifting to the PMAD, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, worry with a lack of sadness, a lack of feeling blue, may be a postpartum anxiety disorder, right? So common anxiety, it's perfectly natural to worry about a baby's safety. Newborns are extremely unclear how to take care of them. What happens if their head flops? It's very stressful. You're primed evolutionarily to try to figure out how to keep them alive. It's not obvious how to keep them alive. But when, even after being reassured from others, from doctors, from your spouse, that the baby is okay, that the baby is breathing, that you're not going to drop the baby, if you cannot be reassured that your baby is safe, you may have a perinatal anxiety disorder. If the worries loop and keep you up at night, that's another condition that responds well to medication and to therapy treatments designed for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. There are actually some really, really good websites and books on postpartum depression and what it is. womensmentalhealth.org is the Harvard Mass General website that is really wonderful and answers all sorts of questions about medications in pregnancy, postpartum depression, breastfeeding and mood. It's a really, really great, well-curated, research-centered base, but it's written for all of us to be able to understand. And I also love the Perinatal Mood and Anxiety Workbook. Is like a self-help book to help people identify postpartum depression and treat it. So there are some good resources out there, to really figure out, if you're not sure if you have postpartum depression, what it is and how to treat it. But absolutely, when in doubt, ask your doctor.
Dr. Sacks, I would, just to follow up on that, I would ask, what's the window that is postpartum? When are we out of postpartum and then just into like, oh, I'm just depressed?
Yeah. Again, there's some debate on that too. I don't know if it's so helpful to define that for people, because again, I think if you're experiencing a depression, the treatments for depression and postpartum depression are the same. The medicines are the same. The therapeutic approaches are generally the same. So I think if it helps you feel like you can make sense of what's going on, to say, I had a baby a year ago and maybe I have postpartum depression because you're feeling depressed 1 year after having a child. Okay, maybe you have postpartum depression. But, these are kind of subjectively defined terms, and the treatment is not very different in terms of when the episode begins. So generally speaking, when a depression begins in the first few months after having a child, we identify it as occurring onset in the postpartum period. But I don't think terminology is always helpful. So if you're feeling that you have a postpartum depression and it's related to your transition after having a baby, just ask for help. It doesn't matter how many months it's been.
Do we have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for this. This has been really helpful.
Thanks for
So
coming.
I am in the early phases of matrescence, and I'm in fertility world.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's any, your ideas about what matrescence looks like for women who are in that phase.
Yeah.
So as a woman I'm 45 now, I was single for a long time. I met my husband not too long ago, and a lot of what I've experienced is this feeling of, well, I know I want to be a mom. I'm excited about being a mom, but there's a little sadness around not being able to just be like, well, I'm going to spend 6 or 7 years with my husband just being a couple and then start to think about this. So just...
Absolutely. Thank you for just encapsulating that. I mean, you so succinctly described what so many women are going through. And it is scary, but I guess, I don't want to also be a minimizer. But I would say I speak to so many women in their 20s who are getting married, who are also terrified. I mean, all different things about facing motherhood are scary. Choosing a partner early in your life when you're not sure if you chose the right partner and you're not so sure who you are is scary. So I think to know that facing your future and facing something so profound as growing your family is very scary. And that's true for women who are getting married later and women who are getting married early. The matrescence story of someone who is not sure if their body is going to conceive a child is complicated, right? It's different. Medical intervention around fertility is demanding. It's stressful. You know, it's very hard to go through. We talked before about disease models. You know, it's hard to go through medical treatments around fertility. It really is. And hormones do impact mood often for people. And, you know, it's hard to tolerate how out of control that experience feels. You know, you sign up for a protocol, right, with a fertility doctor. You don't know what's going to happen. It's very scary. What I like to say to women who come to me with your story is, if you want to be a mother and you see that in your life plan, you will be a mother. That's it. And the question is, how are you going to get there? I think it's super important not to devalue any path to motherhood. You will hear from women who have used donor egg, who have adopted, who have had surrogates, that they feel, many of them who have other children who were conceived biologically in a traditional way, they feel the same to both of the kids. Biology does not make a family. You know, there are plenty of people here who are biologically fully related to their siblings who feel like they have nothing in common with them. Biology does not make a family. I think we're living in a time where we're very lucky and where it's really exciting to have so many resources and path to parenthood. So stay on your matrescence path. You'll get there. Try to tolerate the feeling of out of control, and remember that women whose lives maybe looked the way you thought your life might have looked if this happened at a different time also feel out of control. And trust your process, and trust that motherhood, the mother-child bond, is established in the relationship. It's established in the caretaking. It's established in the time spent. It is not biologically defined. I really feel that way. I really feel that way, having worked with families who've conceived from in all different paths. In all different paths, I do not think there is anything you know about what your relationship is going to be like with your child based on how you conceive, or who that person's going to be, or who you're going to be as a mom.
I love that.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about postpartum depression and the whole idea around the shift of identity that most moms or all moms feel after. Does this work, or am I projecting?
No.
my voice
Yeah,
loud
it works.
But I think it's important to distinguish the difference between postpartum and the identity crisis that takes place, because I think even a year past after becoming a mother, I wasn't sure if I was depressed or I was resisting the identity shift that took place, right? And that was really hard for me to distinguish those. And I think I finally came to realize, my son's now 21 months and I've got a 3-month-old.
Oh, wow.
So when I started to embrace the change within me as a new mom, my new identity, I think I started to feel a sense of liberation. And I think so I think it's important to distinguish those two. It's not necessarily postpartum depression. Postpartum depression gets, I think a lot of people get kind of misdiagnosed, as you were saying earlier. So how can one, in the midst of everything that's happening, and we can all attest to the fact that motherhood is very overwhelming, but how can one rediscover their sense of identity? Because there is an identity shift that takes place. And I recently read an article on the Scientific American about the changes that take place in a mother's brain up to 2 years after a woman has given birth. There's different changes that take place, and it takes up to 2 years for your brain to kind of go back to how it was pre-baby. So how can you nurture the new identity? How can you rediscover your sense of identity, whether it be, as a mom, as
Great
a
question.
working woman?
Great question. Yeah, and a really complex question, but I actually have some simple answers for it. I think in order to think straight about what's going on in your life, who you are, what feels good, what's happened, how do you sort of reconcile how things are going to be since you have a baby now, you need to get enough sleep. I think that's the first thing. I think these things, no one can think straight about solving a complex question in their head like that when they're exhausted, and most new moms are exhausted. So the first question, how are you going to get enough sleep so that you can think straight, so that you can check in with your inner intuition and your emotions and think about things like, who am I now? Who have I been? Like, seriously, you can't do that if you're really tired. And what else are you going to do from the outside in? How are you going to address physical pain you're having? What about getting back into exercise, right? What about just doing normal things in your routine that used to give you pleasure and help you feel well? So is that time with friends? Is that reading a novel? Did you used to read? Is it getting a manicure? Is it going to the dentist for the first time in 2 years? Or getting a haircut for the first time in 2 years? So, really start with the basic physical stuff of what did you used to do to feel healthy and well as you took care of yourself? Because most moms taking care of little babies, they're not only exhausted, they just have cut out taking care of themselves because they don't have time, especially if they've gone back to work. So that's the first thing, reconstitute yourself physically and then emotionally in terms of checking in and just reconnecting with other rituals for pleasure and people who you used to see and talk to. So that might be taking one night or 2 nights or 1 week by yourself away from the baby. For some people it is. For some people it is. I usually what I hear about from moms are that they have to, there's their best friend's bachelorette party or there's a work trip. They have to go somewhere. And they're really anxious. What's going to happen? Is everybody going to be okay? But they tend to feel real good. Once they've sort of launched and have just made that first step, and I'm not saying everyone can or should go away for the week, but even go away for the afternoon. Even spend one night away, just having the experience of being responsible for yourself and asking yourself, what do I want to do right now? And also literally catching up on sleep and stuff like that. That's how you reconnect with your old self. And then that's how you reconnect with your old self. And that's where you get the foundation to ask yourself, okay, who is this new person? And what is this going to look like? But I think you have to heal in terms of some basic postpartum healing and reconstituting your wellness in the way that you used to your old self in order to have some space and time to think about your new self and what it's going to look like and what you want and what are the hard choices you're going to make. Yeah. But I think you need to keep doing this. This is why, this is not like a social media cliche. This is like mental health 101. This is why self-care is so important. And this thing that I don't have time to take care of myself because I have so much to do for the baby, I'm sorry, that goes back into we don't have the option of being perfect. You don't have the option of stopping taking care of your bodies and minds and relationships. You don't. You will wither. And you will not be a happy person, and you will not be a fun person for your child to be around. You will not be a perfect mom if you stop taking care of yourself. And your child will pick up on that, and that will be an example to them about sacrifice and guilt. And then you're going to be, your child's going to be off in the world as an adult going off with their friends, and you're going to say, I took such good care of you. I gave up so much for you. And where are you for me? And then you're going to be one of those moms. But because you're going to be resentful, because you spent the last 30 years not taking care of yourself. And you know what? If your child is healthy and is trying to figure out who they are as a young person and make their way in the world, they're going to say, stop, get off my back, Mom.
I love that. I could listen to you forever and want to, but I want to be mindful of your time, and I'd like to maybe take one more question if that's okay. And I love the topic of self-care, though I never thought that flying cross country without my baby would be like an amazing experience.
Did you do it?
Oh yeah, several times.
Did you have to for work? Is it how?
The first time was because I had to, you know, and
Yeah.
then I slowly allowed myself to give myself permission
Yeah.
to enjoy time away from my son.
Yeah.
It makes me a better mom.
Yeah.
I'm better when I go away with my husband without my child, and we're really lucky because we have my mother, very trusted childcare, to do the overnight shift, which I know is not feasible. It's not an option for so many women. But we've just prioritized, and I sometimes feel like I'm in the minority, but I want to, you know, just share openly, as I think everyone does, about giving ourselves permission for that self-care, having it be more than a social media, like you just do you, but like not really doing you.
Yeah. And I mean, and if you don't have a family member to take care of your baby so you and your partner can go away with a friend.
Yeah.
Go away by yourself. Like, you will sleep, you will order room service, you will be very happy. And also, just, yeah, if what I was going to say also is that if you're unpartnered and you're a single mom, connect with other single moms and give each other breaks. You know, go away and take care of someone else's baby and trust them to leave yours with them so that you can have some time to yourself too.
Totally.
Is there another question?
We can? Okay, great. Yay.
I'm just curious, suggestions on dealing, I think as moms or on a journey to becoming a mom, dealing with judgment and mommy shamers, or just people that would, I feel like every aspect of the journey through matrescence, you're being judged for making one choice versus another. So I'm curious if you have any suggestions, you know, for dealing with that both inwardly and outwardly.
Thank you. That's a big topic. People ask me that all the time. Again, I think, why do people shame other people? Why do people judge other people? Why do people make other people feel bad? Generally, because they're not feeling good inside, right? Like, what is Mean Girls in high school? I mean, and how does that relate to mommy shaming? Is it a different thing amongst women? Probably. I don't know for sure, but probably. You know, so I think, first of all, to know that if someone's making you feel bad, they probably feel bad. And people who feel good about themselves don't tell other people what they're doing wrong. They say, oh, that's interesting. Or they say, oh, I never thought about that. Cool. It's just, if someone's making you feel that way, you need to identify how you're feeling. Identify that maybe they're pushing a button in you for your own self-doubt. So take the time and space when you have it and reflect on what you're feeling insecure about. Because I also hear from people all the time where they're saying, oh, that's interesting, you're feeding that way. And sometimes that's a mom who is feeling bad about herself and implicating shame. And sometimes that's a mom who is not, who's asking a neutral question. But I am feeling anxious about how I'm feeding right now, so I'm feeling shamed, and I'm hearing them as trying to shame me. So ask yourself, are they pushing a button where I'm feeling insecure, which is super common because, as we said before, there aren't really too many right answers to parenting, so we doubt ourselves all the time. Ask yourself, if they really are trying to make me feel bad, like, that's on them, right? And I'm going to try to not internalize that. But if it's pushing a button and it's something that I want to identify, yeah, I am really anxious about my feeding right now. Maybe I should spend more time talking to people or thinking through or reminding myself where I've been. You know, this is the path I took. I tried this, I tried that, and that's why I'm doing this now. You know, taking the time to do that. And I think it's really a lot about boundaries. You know, if there are certain people who are making you feel bad, try to allow yourself to draw a space between you and them. During motherhood, early motherhood, when there is so little time for self-care and for feeling good, do you really need to spend that precious time with people who don't make you feel good? So it's a time when friendships and social structures change a lot. And that can be sad and hard, but when you're in one life stage and your friends are in another, you have to ask yourself, are these really the people who I want to spend my time with? So sometimes that's people who don't, your friends who aren't moms, who might be asking you judgmental or shaming questions because they don't get it. Sometimes that's your friends who are moms, who are just all they can talk about is like parenting techniques, and that's not what you want to do when you're off, not having to be a parent right now, and you want to just hang with other people then. So drawing boundaries, trying to ask yourself, is this pushing a button in me because it's something I'm feeling insecure about, and who can I talk to, and how can I think through feeling better and understanding my own narrative of how I got here? And just identifying, gosh, if that really is someone who's saying something that is quite negative, like there's something going on with them. And I don't necessarily need to spend time around it, but I also don't necessarily need to take it into and internalize that as some reflection that I'm doing something wrong.
Thank you. We'll take one more. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. We can take two.
Oh, we can.
Yeah, great. Stop.
Thank you, first of all. It's been really inspiring. So I go back to work on Monday. I'm just curious. And I know there are others who recently come back, and if you have kind of successful strategies that you've seen women employ as they kind of navigate that transition.
Yeah, sure. I was just talking to someone about this for my podcast yesterday. So I do have some basic tips, and again, these are not all possible for all moms, but I think if you can go back on a Thursday or Friday to have a short week beginning, that's helpful, because like one day is a really long day, but to start on a Monday and have the whole week, that's hard. If you are handing off your baby to a child care provider, to a daycare or a nanny or family, to have some overlap time where that caretaker is with you, and where you're able to observe, ask questions, share how you do things, and talk about the general plan. And even if you're going to want to be communicating throughout the day while you're away at work, like, I want you to send me photos or things like that. Think about what you need in your day and your week as far as your schedule in terms of pumping, in terms of what time you have to leave. Come up with a solution for how that's going to work in your workday, and inform your boss and coworkers about what you're going to do. So it's not just about figuring out what you need to do. Oh, and now I need to leave at 5 because I have to pick up my son at daycare at 5:30, and I used to stay till 6:30. But it's not enough to announce that. You need to say, I have to leave at 5, but I'm going to be checking in. I'll be logging on back again at 7. I'll be calling in. I will be, coming around at 4 and asking you if there's anything. You need to also come up with solutions for how, given your new schedule, you're going to still be able to do your job. And I think the best way to sort of feel good at work is to come up with those solutions yourself, because a lot of coworkers and bosses, they don't know how to solve this. There isn't a great opportunity or attention in the workplace to make work environments work for working moms. So I am sorry, but the onus is on you to figure out what needs to be changed, and for you to come up with your own solutions and inform people about them. Because I think it's when people are like, I have to leave at 5, but they don't come up with a solution for how that's going to work for the team. That's when they feel more victimized. That's when they feel more fragile. That's when they feel like no one is supporting me. But it's often, if you tell everybody how it's going to work, they'll be like, okay. And then, of course, there are environments where there's real discrimination, right? So that's a separate issue. So those are just some topics. Yeah. Was there one more question? I'm fine taking one last question.
Yeah, I know that's, who would like to?
It's okay if there isn't.
Yeah.
I don't really have but I have a lot of points. So, hi guys. Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you so much. Obviously, this has been incredible. But just going back to what you asked about like being judged, and I mean, I live here in New York City. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. But I know when I had that little boy 4 years ago, and I was 35 years old. So you're having your babies later. You think you know who you are. Your whole identity changes. As a mature woman. And I felt so judged
that's great.
All of it, it's like, oh my God, all these women just need to be honest with each other and support each other.
Yeah.
Because then you see that, like, it's like you said, they're feeling the same way.
Yeah.
That's why they're asking you that. In
Yeah.
like a judgy way, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like I'm doing my best. That's it.
I think that's awesome, and I think the only thing I would add to that is to take yourself seriously while you're, because it's not like, oh, I'm so lazy, I just plugged in the iPad. It's like, no, I've learned that if I'm gonna be able to get my toddler through dinner and also, make sure that my infant isn't gonna escalate and my partner isn't home from work, that like we have to use the iPad so that he eats. Like this isn't like you're making mistakes, you're making solutions to complicated problems. And it's not like then you're a lazy screen time mom, you're a mom who's figuring out how to feed 2 kids. So don't feel like you have to apologize for your choices because they're probably being made from a really good reason, but based on your experience. So, take pride in yourself. You don't have to be like a pro screen advocate, but just like, actually, this is sometimes how we get through dinner. That's all. I try to feed my kids at night. Like, that's the reason. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. And it's really nice to be here. Yeah, so I'm sure Carrie will share this, but if you wanted to find out more about my work, you can find me at alexandrasacksmd.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook under that tag too. And if you're interested in the book, you can find it on my website and the TED Talk too.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming.